Hello and welcome to InvestorToday.ca. I'm your host, Dave Glover. InvestorToday.ca is brought to you in conjunction with RBL Communications, your online IR specialists. InvestorToday.ca is coming to you live from the Chicago Resource Expo. It's Friday, the 27th of April, and I'm joined by Mr. Stewart Wallis, who is the president and CEO of Crosshair Energy. Crosshair Energy Corp, which trades on the TSX under the symbol CXX, and on the New York Exchange as well under the symbol CXZ. Stuart Wallis, welcome to the show.
Right. Thank you very much, Dave. Pleased to be here.
We're grateful to have you here, quite frankly. Very small boutique show here in Chicago, so when you get an opportunity to sit down with someone like yourself, you want to just leap on it,
Absolutely. It's a great attendance here as well.
Well, for the viewers, can you give us a quick overview, if you will, a brief overview of Crosshair's properties and projects? I understand you guys started in Labrador.
Our original property we staked and acquired back in 2006, before the start of the real uranium boom. And that's property is what drove the stock to a $400 million market cap back in 07 and 08, before the market financial crash and the moratorium, which we'll speak about a little bit later.
Right.
But we've now still got those two properties in Labrador. They've got a total of some 20 million pounds of uranium on them and 140 million pounds of vanadium. So we've got two metals up there that we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Down in the U.S., where we've started focusing more recently, we have two projects as well. Boot Hill with 5 million pounds on it. It's a in situ recovery situation. And Juniper Ridge, which we'll talk about later, which is a open pit heap leach, which we just completed a program, and we've got 5 million pounds sitting in that property as well.
Well, a lot of viewers are probably aware of what happened in Japan with the tsunami, and that did have an effect on the uranium market. So for the viewers, can you provide something of a uranium update, a market update?
Yeah, well, certainly, Dave. The uranium market has been quite volatile, I guess you could say. Back in 07, 08, the spot price hit 107. Today we're down to $52 and change spot price. But you have to remember that there's not many sales done on the spot price. A lot of it is long-term contracts, and the long-term contract price went as high as $75.80, and it's now sitting at $60.65. If you talk to the analysts and the people that know and study uranium markets, they're saying that this time next year the price could be $70, $75 again, spot price. And going forward another 3 or 4 years, even higher than that. There's no doubt that there's a supply-demand gap, as Marshall Barrell talked this afternoon about, that right now the supply-demand gap is being filled with HEU supplies from Russia. That agreement ends in 2013, a year away. And then there's going to be little secondary supply. So moving forward, we're going to see that supply-demand gap increase after 2015, certainly. It's going to get larger and larger because we're talking about more reactors being built. Germany and Japan shutting down their reactors, while somewhat significant today, in a couple of years' time, it's going to be insignificant with the builds coming on in China, India, and even Saudi Arabia and the Arab Emirates.
Well, and you know what? You mentioned during the introduction there about the moratorium. So can we talk about the Labrador moratorium? How did that hinder Crosshair? And now that the moratorium has been lifted, can you talk about what benefits Crosshair is going to be reaping from that?
Absolutely. Back in 2008, the First Nations government in Labrador was a little bit upset with the rate of speed of the exploration going forward, and particularly with Aurora Energy's and Paladin's project moving fast, and they didn't have environmental regulations in place. So really, they said, whoa, stop, we need 3 years to develop our regulations, no more mining. But they said you can go ahead and explore. But they didn't realize that a company isn't going to explore if they can't see an end result in mining.
Right.
And it affected all the mining companies in Labrador simply because you were tarred with the brush. Our ground was 90% outside of the moratorium, but we just couldn't raise capital money. And as the stock market tanked on us, the uranium price tanked, and so did the stock price. And quite frankly, that's when we went to the U.S., because we said we can pick up projects here and we can finance them.
Right. And that moves us to Juniper Ridge, one of your projects in Wyoming.
Well, that's right. The moratorium's over, but we're still concentrating in the U.S. Not to say that Labrador is dead. As I said, we're still looking to expand the resources in Labrador. We've got a drill program this summer. Juniper Ridge is an interesting project. It's an open pit heap leach. We think that's going to make it look attractive in terms of operating capital costs, and it's also in Wyoming, which is a state that many companies are currently permitting in. Mm-hmm. So you can permit, and permitting is becoming not easier, but the regulators are becoming a little more familiar with how it's going forward. And as a result, we feel that you can permit a mine in Wyoming, a uranium mine, in 2.5 years, which I think is pretty rapid.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned the regulatory process, and I suppose, now this is just a supposition on my part, mind you, but I suppose that with more companies permitting, it gives obviously more access to information for the powers that be that have to make those regulations and say yes or no. And so being familiar with projects of this type for the regulators, it would probably make it that much easier to streamline the process. Would you agree?
Absolutely. When the first companies went onto the permitting stage, if you like, the regulators, both in Wyoming and the federal regulators at the NRC, they didn't have enough people on board to be able to handle the number of permits. So it was a slow process. And the other part of the equation is, as you mentioned, you've got a huge volume of data that the companies that started, they're producing, and they're getting questions back from the regulators, mm-hmm. and we're able to look at those questions and answers, and you'll be able to streamline your application so it goes through the process that much faster.
Right. So it's about understanding the regulatory process, obviously familiarizing yourself with, or the familiarity of the regulators in order to streamline the process. So, because a lot of people are going to look around and look at, especially a uranium project, and think about the environmental impacts. And of course, those are very significant when a regulator is looking at it. But being familiar with enough companies, especially companies that are producing and being permitted in uranium, is going to go to some degree anyway to streamlining that process.
Absolutely, Dave. You're absolutely right. As I said, it's looking more and more favorable for permitting in Wyoming especially.
Well, as always, I like to give my guests the last word, and so I'm going to ask Stewart if he can offer any advice to investors that are looking at uranium, perhaps looking at Crosshair, and even existing investors, if there's anything you can put to that.
Well, Dave, I like to look at the company. I like to say, well, we're an undervalued company. We're exploration, development. We're not producing, but we're moving forward to production in a couple of years. And I think you have to sort of look at the company as being undervalued compared to its peers. And if you look at the pounds in the ground that we have, which is some close to 40 million pounds of uranium, and just toss in the vanadium, a strategic metal,
exactly.
as a bonus, and you look at pounds in the ground and compare us on a capitalized basis, we are much less pricier, if I can use that word, mm-hmm. than some of our competitors. And I think that's a good point now to get into the company.
That's right. So the company is, again, Crosshair Energy Corp, which trades on the TSX under the symbol CXX. It also trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol CXZ. I've been sitting here with Stewart Wallis, President and CEO of Crosshair. I'm Dave Glover. You've been watching InvestorToday.ca. Stewart, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. We'll see you next time here on InvestorToday.ca.